wanted to talk about for the quarter would be project communication. So let's go through the slides we would have done in class this week for Thanksgiving. Let's take a look. So there's a couple different dimensions of project communication that I want us to look at. Different types of communication that can happen with various projects, marketing efforts that you might do. One could be informal or unofficial communications. Those could be with the public, or it might not be, but if they are official or formal or hierarchical, it's usually just within your team. So there's that external or public aspect of communication with projects where there may be things that you're not really like talking to the public about, but there are maybe some things that you are. So some of it may be internal, and these are all just like adjectives to describe the dimensions of project communication. Different kind of types of communications is another part that we want to look at. They're either written, spoken, formal or informal. They can be with gestures and words and physical media like whiteboards. When I do project management, whiteboards are really important, but you can also use pictures. You can even use collage to work out something, often in group meetings. And then there's external media too, which might just be the news, any kind of social media platform, newspapers, etc. And it's important for us to realize that our communication might be a little bit different for each one. I want to look at the 5 C's of clear project communication. That would be correct grammar and spelling, a clear purpose in the writing, whatever communication it is, whether it's video, writing, audio. It should be concise so that it doesn't go on and on and on. It should be coherent and have a logical flow. And I think it should be controlled as well. So you have a controlled flow of ideas where there's just a logical progression in your communication. And this is really important so that the majority of people that see your communication get it and understand what you're talking about. 3 dimensions of the 5 C's, basically like this surrounds the 5 C's that we just talked about, would be active listening, right? So we need to be aware of cultural and personal differences between people. And we also want to manage stakeholder expectations and what are the basics of persuasion and motivation within all that, right? So how do we persuade people to buy something, or how do we persuade our boss to support a marketing effort, right? Number 2, in terms of dimension of what affects the 5 C's that we just talked about, would be sometimes it's the location, the technology used, the language used, how we manage knowledge, right? And then 3 would be the urgency, right? And other aspects of that could be confidentiality or the project environment itself, like how easy it is to complete the project, how easy is it to work on it, and what is the urgency? Urgency can be a really big motivator, so it's something to think about whenever you're communicating things. And next, we're going to be talking about like when to communicate. That's the other part of projects. So there's 3 different kinds of project communication methods. This is another way to break down what we're talking about here with communicating about your projects. One would be pull methods. So pull methods would be whiteboards, shared drives. I say pull because you are choosing to go get it yourself, right? So you might be working on something and going and getting it yourself because you know where it's located. A push method could be like I'm sending you an email, I'm pushing it towards you. And then an interactive method could be you're all in a meeting or a Zoom call or an event. And excuse Siri there. I'm going to keep going though. We need to monitor communication as well. Like what are the responses to our posts, right? What are our responses to our email? And it's good to keep track of that so you know what people are thinking. There's also stuff like statistics that could be important to look at when you're monitoring what your communication is with other people. How many people came to the meeting? How many people opened an email if you have that information? How many people read through the whole thing or saw the whole video? This can be important to know how effective you are. And then there's the public monitoring as well, just like how many shares, how many mentions, how many likes. That could be good statistics to know about with your communication and what you might have done right versus what you could do better. I suggest you have a communications management plan for any kind of marketing effort that you do. This is part of integrating it throughout the whole company or business. One of the things could be being really clear what the stakeholder requirements are for the marketing effort so that you're not the only one that knows what the requirements are. Because if you're working with anyone else, they should be focused on what your stakeholder wants, because you need to basically knock it out of the park for them. How do you escalate something? If something goes wrong, how do you run it up the flagpole? Who do you talk to? Who is in charge of talking to the main stakeholder, basically? You can look at methods, the time frame, and the frequency of communications around things, and we're going to look at that a little more deeply in a minute. And what kind of groups are involved, right? So you might want to predefine a RACI, or that would be those that are responsible, R, accountable, A, consulted, C, or informed, I, and who would just be on a need-to-know basis, right? So that kind of matricy or rubric for communication of who's responsible or accountable can be really important as to who you communicate to, and it's really worth looking through there. If you've got something that's like technological, you might want to make a glossary of terminology, and you might want to be aware of what kind of restraints you might have in communicating something. Like, is there a holiday around that time period? Does it conflict with something else that the company's doing? I'm going to stop the video now, and then we're going to talk about problem team dynamics in our next section.